So, Chris, looking ahead on the media landscape, what are some predictions for the next 3 to 5 years?
I think that NBC is going to finally crunch the data that they got after the Olympics and how it was disseminated online, and they're going to start going like, there is something to this connected TV after all, and delivering content over IP. My prediction over the next 3 to 5 years is going to be that we're going to see a lot of individualized IP-driven content on the web, and finally it's going to start arriving on the big television at home.
So, Anna, looking ahead, can you give me some predictions about the media landscape over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I'll talk about three things. I think that if you look at print media, the traditional print media, magazines and newspapers, I think that you are going to see a kind of bottoming out there. In other words, magazines and newspapers have been beaten up and taken their lumps. And if you look at, for example, the New York Times, which I think we could all say, made a terrible decision by saying, in 1993 that it was going to be free, and then finally took its hard medicine and saying it's going to be paid. I think that's a really good sort of object lesson in where we are with print media. That I think there's still probably going to be some very painful going out of business stories, like Business Week and Newsweek being absorbed. Nobody ever thought that could happen. But I think we're going to see a bottoming out in print. I think we're going to continue to see good news in the book industry. I think we see digital books being very pervasive, not without pain. Again, you talk to the major publishing houses, and you hear a lot of pain. And I think when we talk about the big 6 publishing houses, I think it's a real question whether Barnes & Noble is going to stay in business. And I've heard some predictions there, which I subscribe to, that if Barnes & Noble does go out of business, which I'd say is a 50-50 shot, that we'll go back to, we'll devolve into a world of small publishing houses and small bookstores, which would not be a bad thing to happen. But all in all, it's not going to take away content from people, because ebooks are still going to be available, and there are a lot of really interesting efforts on to make sure ebooks are borrowable in libraries and so forth. So magazines, newspapers bottoming out, some pain in the book industry, but with a very bright theme of ebooks carrying through. And I think in the broadcast industry, the pain is going to come, and there's going to be a fair amount of pain, because I always tell the story of pulling my hair out in the 90s and talking to publishing executives on the print side, and they're saying, Anna, just don't worry, really, nobody is going to be reading online. I know you're stressed about it, but I'm not going to invest this, whatever it was at the time, $100,000 really, because it's not very important and no one's ever going to read online. And I'm not saying it's quite that bad in the broadcast industry, but it is denial in a big way, and so it's a little bit like global warming, unless you're starting to take real action right now. You are just, by the time it's here, you're just not going to have the ramp up time, because technology takes time and the learning curve is fairly long, and you can't institutionalize that knowledge in yourself and in other people. A small technology project in this kind of industry takes 18 months. And the ones that we're talking about that need to happen in broadcast have the kind of 3 to 5 year window. And we're already at that. I mean, connected TV over IP is going to be here in certainly in 3 to 5 years. So, the starting line was like last year, and most people have missed the starting line. So I think the pain is really going to come in broadcast.
So what about Hulu? Have they made the step?
I think Hulu has made, that's what you call the good old college try. But when you look at Hulu, I mean, obviously the investors in Hulu are the major broadcast channels. So that tells you that the broadcasters are trying to invest in a platform that is going to save broadcasting and be able to weave advertising into video. But when you look at the Hulu premium, with the one you pay, I think $7 or $8, close to $8 for, there's still advertising in that. And you know, you go to your own cocktail party and say, you know, when was the last time you watched an ad? And you also ask yourself the question of, well, you know, once the genie is out, in all of technology, once the genie has been out of the bottle, we have not been able to put it back. There may be a case for it online with online video, that somehow we're going to get people to watch advertising. I think pre-roll works pretty well when it's free. But when you have to pay, and when you're fighting every young kid and hacker who knows how to create a utility to scrub the advertising from whatever he or she is watching, I just don't see how that genie is going to go back into the bottle. So we're back to the question of how advertising agencies do a better job of helping their customers, whose job is not, they get up in the morning, they don't say, how do I sponsor content? They say, how do I sell my product? Of finding a way to sponsor content in today's environment. It is not the traditional way. So I think Hulu has made a good effort, but I don't know that in a world where people are saying, I don't want to watch ads anymore, that is going to succeed.
You bring up an interesting point, but I'm brought back to the early days of cable, when anybody could just plug in a TV and get an antenna and get broadcast networks, and then you would be paying for extra networks, these cable networks, that were also ad supported. And there didn't seem to be any backlash in those days to the concept of paying for more content and in addition having to sit through ads. Do you think that the migration to the internet will have that same mindset, at least in the beginning?
It's a very good question. I think that in the early days of cable, I think that normal human beings know that content has to be paid for. If you give them a good interface, I think iTunes was a perfect example. You make the interface easy, and you make the device really elegant and delivering the content really, really well. People will pay for content. So I don't think we're in a world of liars and thieves who want to get all of their content for free under any circumstances. What I do think has changed is the DVR. I think the DVR was really, really a game changer. And again, with I'm not knowledgeable enough to know what regulation maybe could have perhaps in the past be put into place to stop whatever the DVR revolution was. But the fact is that it wasn't. So that genie is out of the bottle. So people are now, and once you train consumers in that behavior, people are now trained that they can watch whatever. Yes, they pay for cable, and they're filtering out ads on that too. So they are now trained for, how many years most of us have been on DVRs? 3 years, mass consumer movement. So how do you train people away from that behavior? I don't know, but it's in the culture right now. So getting people to not fast forward through ads, that's a tough one, and they've been doing it for 3 years.